10 men, 10 kill counts, one list, no mythology, no movie versions, no statue in the town square version of who these men were and what they did. The frontier kept records, imperfect records, incomplete, contested, biased in every direction simultaneously, but records, court documents, coroner's reports, jail registers, newspaper accounts filed the morning after by men who had stood close enough to see, sworn testimony from witnesses who, for whatever reason, decided to tell the truth that day. This list is built from those records, the confirmed numbers only, the kills that evidence actually supports. Where historians disagree, I'll tell you. Where the record is solid, I'll tell you that too. Some of the numbers are smaller than the legend promises. Some are larger than the history books admit. All of them are real. Number 10 is a man who killed 4 people in 4 days and cleaned up one of the most dangerous towns on the Texas border. Number 1 is a man who killed his first person at 15 and his last at 42 and died from a bullet he never saw coming. The distance between those 2 points is the full, unvarnished, documented width of what the Wild West gunfighter actually was. Let's count. Number 10, Dallas Stoudenmire, El Paso, Texas, confirmed kills. 4 in 4 days. The number is small. Don't let it fool you. Dallas Stoudenmire killed 4 men in the first 4 days of his career as El Paso town marshal. Not 4 men across a decade of frontier violence. 4 men. 4 days. In April 1881, in a border town so lawless that 3 previous marshals had simply stopped showing up. He arrived in El Paso on April 11th, 1881. He was tall, 6'4", broad through the shoulders. He wore 2 pistols butt forward in the cross-draw style, which allowed a faster draw from a standing start than any conventional holster rig. He had already killed men before El Paso. He would kill more after. But those first 4 days defined him permanently and established, in the specific brutal language of the frontier, exactly what El Paso had hired. The 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight. That is what history calls it. April 14th, 1881, 3 days into his tenure, a dispute at the Acme Saloon that spilled into the street and became a shooting engagement that lasted, from the first shot to the last body on the ground, 5 seconds. 4 men dead. 3 of them shot by Stoudenmire. One of them, tragically, an innocent Mexican bystander caught between the lines. He didn't slow down after that. Within the year, he had killed 2 more men in separate engagements. He cleaned up El Paso with the specific, methodical efficiency of a man who had exactly 1 tool in his kit and applied it without hesitation to every problem he encountered. He died in 1882, shot 3 times in a gunfight with the Manning brothers, men he had been circling toward a confrontation with for months. He went down with his pistol still firing. He was found with his teeth sunk into one of his killer's hands. Dallas Stoudenmire was not the deadliest man in the West. He was possibly the most concentrated, 4 kills in 4 days. Nobody in El Paso tested him after that. Number 9, Kingfisher. Texas and Mexico. Confirmed kills, 7 documented. Claimed 30, plus Kingfisher wore a tiger skin vest and silver-studded chaps, and a Mexican sombrero with snakeskin hatband. He was 23 years old. He had already been tried for murder 4 times. He had been acquitted 4 times. He put a sign on the road leading to his ranch in Dimmitt County, Texas. It read, "This is Kingfisher's road. Take the other one." People took the other one. Fisher was born in Texas in 1854, raised in the specific post-Civil War chaos that turned a generation of young Texas men into something the law found difficult to process. He was fast. Genuinely, documentably fast. Fast in the specific mechanical sense of a man whose draw had been practiced to the point where it was no longer voluntary, where the gun was simply in his hand before the conscious decision to draw it had fully formed. He killed his first man at 17. He killed others along the Texas-Mexico border. Raids into Mexico that produced both horses and bodies in quantities that the Mexican government formally protested to Washington. He claimed 30 kills. The documented count is 7. The gap between those numbers says everything about the border country he operated in, where witnesses had a documented tendency to develop convenient memory problems when subpoenaed. By 1884, he had begun to settle. Ranch, wife, children. He had even taken a deputy sheriff position in Uvalde County, wearing the badge with the same unapologetic confidence he brought to everything else. On March 11th, 1884, he went to the Vaudeville Theater in San Antonio with his friend Ben Thompson. They were ambushed in the theater. 13 shots from multiple gunmen. Both Fisher and Thompson died in the volley. Kingfisher was 29 years old. He had been trying genuinely to become something other than what he was. The frontier didn't always allow that. Number 8, Ben Thompson. Texas. Confirmed kills, 6 documented engagements. Estimated 8 to 12. Ben Thompson was the most technically skilled gunfighter who ever lived in Texas. That is not sentiment. That is the assessment of contemporaries who had seen most of the competition. Bat Masterson, who had seen everything and romanticized nothing, said Ben Thompson was the most dangerous man with a pistol he had ever encountered. Masterson chose his words carefully. He said dangerous, not fast, not accurate, dangerous. The specific, comprehensive quality of a man whose threat was total rather than merely physical. Thompson was born in England in 1843 and arrived in Texas as a child. He fought for the Confederacy. He fought in Mexico. He gambled professionally, managed saloons, wore good clothes, and killed men with the controlled precision of a craftsman who takes his work seriously. He was not reckless. He was not theatrical. He calculated. He waited for the moment when the advantage was fully his, and then he acted with a speed and accuracy that left nothing for the other man to respond to. He killed his first man at 17. He killed others. He became, in the specific hierarchy of the Texas frontier, the man that other dangerous men measured themselves against and did not feel superior to. He was appointed chief of police of Austin, Texas, in 1880. This was remarkable not because Thompson was remotely qualified for the position in any conventional sense, but because Austin had correctly calculated that having the most dangerous man in Texas on their side was worth more than any alternative they could afford. He was ambushed alongside King Fisher in San Antonio in 1884. 13 shots from men who had specifically chosen ambush rather than confrontation, because direct confrontation with Ben Thompson was not a viable option. That choice, the ambush rather than the gunfight, is the most accurate testimony to Ben Thompson's reputation that the historical record contains. Number 7. Bass Reeves, Indian Territory. Confirmed kills 14. Arrests 3,000 plus. Here's the number that matters most on this entire list. Not kills, arrests 3,000. Bass Reeves arrested over 3,000 criminals in a 32-year career as Deputy U.S. Marshal in Indian Territory. He arrested murderers and horse thieves and train robbers and men with federal warrants going back years, in territory so vast and so lawless that most law enforcement simply declined to enter it. He went in anyway, every time. With outstanding warrants, handcuffs, and a .44 Winchester rifle, he could shoot accurately to a quarter mile. He was born into slavery in 1838. He escaped during the Civil War, broke free after dispute with his enslaver over a card game, ran into Indian Territory, and spent years living among the Creek and Cherokee nations, learning their languages with the thoroughness of a man who understood that knowledge was the one form of property that couldn't be taken from him. After the war, after emancipation, he became a farmer. Then, in 1875, Judge Isaac Parker, the hanging judge of Fort Smith, recruited him specifically because he knew the territory and the people in it better than any white officer Parker could hire. He killed 14 men during those 32 years, 14 in 3,000 arrests. The ratio tells you everything about how Bass Reeves operated, the patience, the strategy, the preference for bringing men in alive that distinguished a professional from a gunfighter in every way that mattered. He was never convicted of a crime. He was never shot by a man he was pursuing. His hat was shot off twice. A coat button was hit once. The men shooting at him had worse luck than that. He was 6'2", 190 pounds, born in chains. Died in 1910 as a Muskogee City patrolman at 72 years old. Still working, still arresting people, on a beat where crime reportedly ceased to occur simply because of whose beat it was. The mythology of the Wild West produced 100 legendary names. Almost none of them deserve it more than this one. Almost none of them are less famous. Number 6. Clay Allison, New Mexico and Texas. Confirmed kills, 12 to 15. Claimed 21 plus. Clay Allison was not like the others on this list. The others were professionals. Men who killed with the controlled, purposeful violence of someone who has calculated the risk and accepted it. Allison was something different. He was unpredictable in the specific, terrifying way of a man who genuinely enjoyed what he did. He danced naked on bar tops. He once beheaded a man, a convicted killer named Cruz Vega, cut off the head, stuck it on a pole, and rode 15 miles to a saloon in Cimarron, New Mexico, where he deposited it on the bar and ordered a drink. He stripped naked after gunfights and danced in the street. He pulled his own tooth with pliers, decided the dentist was doing it wrong, and shot the man in the mouth. Not fatally, but pointedly. He fought in the Civil War for the Confederacy, and came back from it with what modern medicine would identify as traumatic brain injury from a head wound that left him with seizures, mood changes, and the specific volcanic unpredictability that defined every year of his post-war life. The frontier had no framework for this. It had no treatment for it. It simply absorbed him and cataloged the results. His kills were documented and real. Gunfights, not ambushes, in the full frontal tradition of men who preferred the direct method. He killed at least 12 men. Some estimates run higher. He was tried for murder multiple times. Acquitted every time. The juries of New Mexico and Texas looked at Clay Allison and made what they felt was the practical decision. He died in 1887, not in a gunfight. He fell off a wagon. A wheel ran over his head. The most genuinely frightening gunfighter in New Mexico territory died in a farm accident on the way home from a supply run. His tombstone, which he wrote himself before the accident that killed him, reads, "He never killed a man that did not need killing." Clay Allison decided who needed killing. Nobody argued with the decision while he was alive. Number 5. Wild Bill Hickok. Kansas and Dakota Territory. Confirmed kills, 7 to 11 documented. Claimed 100 plus. Wild Bill Hickok claimed to have killed over 100 men. The actual documented number is between 7 and 11, depending on which historical standard you apply. This gap, between 7 and 100, is the most instructive fact about Wild Bill Hickok, because the gap itself was the weapon. The reputation was the gun, and Hickok understood this with a clarity that made him the most tactically sophisticated gunfighter in the history of the American frontier. He was born James Butler Hickok in 1837 in Illinois. He drifted west, scouted for the Army, gambled, and killed men in engagements so precisely executed that they became the template for the duel mythology that the dime novels spent decades constructing. He killed Davis Tutt in Springfield, Missouri in 1865 in one of the only genuine stand-up, face-to-face, quick-draw duels in the documented history of the frontier. Tutt drew first. Hickok killed him from 75 yards, one shot, one bullet. He carried his revolvers butt forward in a red sash. He always sat with his back to the wall. He never let a man he didn't trust stand behind him. He enforced these arrangements politely but completely. And in Abilene and Hays City, the most dangerous cattle towns in Kansas, men accepted the arrangements because the alternative was testing Wild Bill Hickok's reflexes, which nobody seriously wanted to do. He was going blind by 1876. The eyes that had aimed those revolvers at 75 yards were failing. He knew it. He came to Deadwood anyway, a broken-down gambling town in the Black Hills, and sat in a poker game on August 2nd, 1876, in a seat with his back exposed, which he never did, because someone else had taken the wall seat and he was too tired to insist. Jack McCall walked in behind him and shot him in the back of the head at contact range. The cards in his hand, aces and eights, are called the dead man's hand. They have been called that ever since, not because of the cards, because of whose hands they were in. Number 4, Doc Holliday, Georgia to Colorado. Confirmed kills, 1 to 3. Reputation, priceless. He was already dying when he picked up a gun. That is the fact that changes everything about Doc Holliday. Every gunfight, every reputation, every story the frontier told about the most feared dentist in American history. He was dying from the moment he left Georgia in 1873 with a tuberculosis diagnosis and a one-way ticket west. Everything that followed, the gambling, the drinking, the killing, the friendship with Wyatt Earp, the gunfight at the OK Corral, happened inside the parentheses of a terminal illness that should have killed him years before it finally did. John Henry Holliday was born in Georgia in 1851, raised in the genteel tradition of the Southern aristocracy, educated, cultured. He earned a degree in dentistry from the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in 1872. He was 20 years old and already coughing blood. The doctor said, "Go west, drier air. Maybe it helps." He went to Dallas, Texas, opened a dental practice, and discovered two things simultaneously: that patients didn't want a consumptive dentist coughing on their teeth, and that he had a remarkable natural talent for cards. The practice closed, the gambling started, the drinking started. Both habits were, medically speaking, precisely the wrong choices for a man with tuberculosis. He made them anyway with the specific, deliberate recklessness of a man who has already decided the timeline is non-negotiable. Here is what the mythology always gets wrong about Doc Holliday. He was not a great gunfighter. He was not the deadliest man in any room he entered. The confirmed kill count, the number that actually holds up under historical scrutiny, is between 1 and 3. 1 documented killing, 2 possible. That's it. The man that Hollywood has killed dozens with a pistol killed perhaps one man with one. What he had, instead of kills, was something more valuable on the frontier. He had a reputation. And he had the specific, fearless quality of a dying man who has genuinely stopped caring whether he survives the next 30 seconds. Bat Masterson, who did not give out compliments freely, said Holliday was the most dangerous man he knew. Not because of the kills, because of the indifference. You cannot intimidate a man who wakes up every morning already reconciled to his own death. Wyatt Earp said Holliday saved his life in Dodge City. That debt purchased a loyalty Holliday honored without complaint across years of legal trouble, violent confrontation, and the grinding, humiliating decline of a brilliant man being eaten from the inside by a disease that had no treatment and no mercy. On October 26, 1881, in 30 seconds of gunfire in Tombstone, Arizona, Holliday stood beside the Earp brothers and killed Tom McClory with a shotgun, and possibly Frank McClory with a pistol. 3 men died. The OK Corral gunfight became the most written about 30 seconds in the history of the American West. Holliday was grazed by a bullet. He kept firing. After Tombstone, after the Earp vendetta ride, after the legal proceedings that followed him to Colorado, Doc Holliday ended up in Glenwood Springs. The mineral waters, they said, good for the lungs. He checked into the Hotel Glenwood in 1887 and did not leave. He died in his bed on November 8th, 1887, 36 years old. He looked down at his bare feet, a man who had always expected to die with his boots on, and said the last words he ever spoke. "This is funny." The most feared man in Tombstone, killed by tuberculosis, in a bed in Colorado, with clean sheets and his boots off. He was right, it was funny, in the specific bitter way that the frontier reserved for its best endings. Number 3, Kid Curry, Harvey Logan, Montana to Colorado. Confirmed kills, 9-11. Pinkerton verdict, not one redeeming feature. William Pinkerton ran the most famous detective agency in America. He had tracked Jesse James. He had pursued Butch Cassidy across 2 continents. He had spent 30 years cataloging the worst men the frontier produced. He said this about Kid Curry. He has not one single redeeming feature. He is the only criminal I know of who does not have one single good point. Not one. Not a loyalty to his gang, not a fondness for animals, not a courtesy to women or a generosity to strangers. Nothing. A blank where the human qualities should be, filled in entirely with violence and the willingness to apply it to anyone who presented themselves as a target. Harvey Logan was born in Iowa in 1867 and arrived in Montana as a young man, working cattle, keeping mostly to himself, giving no particular sign of what he was about to become. Then a rancher named Winters killed his brother Johnny in a land dispute, and something that had been contained in Harvey Logan became permanently uncontained. He killed Pike Landusky in a saloon fight in 1894. Landusky had attacked him first, had filed assault charges against him, had arranged for his brother to be beaten, but what mattered was the manner of it. Landusky's gun jammed. Logan's didn't. Logan shot him in the head and walked out of the saloon while Landusky was still falling. He joined Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. This is where the numbers get significant, because Butch Cassidy famously did not kill anyone. The Sundance Kid famously killed no one. The Wild Bunch was, in the specific hierarchy of frontier outlaw gangs, a remarkably non-lethal organization. Fast horses, good planning, clean getaways, minimal bodies. And then there was Kid Curry. He killed Sheriff Joe Hazen after the Wilcox train robbery in 1899. He killed 2 deputies in Arizona in 1900. He killed Sheriff Jesse Tyler in Utah in 1901. He killed men in Montana and New Mexico and Tennessee. He killed them during robberies, during escapes, during pursuits, during personal disputes, and on at least 2 occasions, during what can only be described as a systematic campaign of revenge against every man connected to the death of his brothers. He was arrested in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1902, sentenced to 20 years. He escaped in 1903 by fashioning a wire hook from a broom, retrieving a shoebox containing 2 pistols from the end of a hallway, putting the wire around a guard's neck, and walking out. This is documented. He robbed a Denver and Rio Grande train near Parachute, Colorado on June 7, 1904. A posse caught up with him 2 days later. He was shot, wounded badly enough that running was no longer viable. He looked at the men around him, said, "I'm hit. I will put an end to it all," and shot himself in the head. He died buried in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, 1 cemetery over from Doc Holliday. 2 of the most famous gunfighters of the Old West buried a short walk from each other in the same Colorado mountain town. Holliday of tuberculosis, Curry of a self-inflicted bullet wound. Neither of them died in the gunfight that their reputations promised. The frontier had a habit of denying men the death they had earned. Number 2, Billy the Kid, New Mexico Territory. Confirmed kills, 4-9. Died, 21 years old. He was 21 years old when Pat Garrett shot him in the dark. 21. Not 21 kills, as the legend always insisted, 1 for each year of his short and chaotic life. The documented number is somewhere between 4 and 9, depending on how you count the Lincoln County war engagements where multiple men fired simultaneously, and the attribution becomes archaeology rather than history. Born Henry McCarty in New York City in 1859, or possibly 1860, even the basic facts of his existence were contested from the beginning. He moved west with his widowed Irish immigrant mother, lost her to tuberculosis at 15, and within a year was already in trouble in Arizona Territory. Laundry theft, horse theft. The petty desperation of a teenage boy who had been left entirely alone in a world that was not organized for the survival of teenage boys, left entirely alone. He was small, 5'7", 130 pounds, buck teeth, blue-gray eyes described by everyone who looked into them as unusually light and unusually calm. He smiled easily and laughed genuinely and was, by multiple contemporary accounts, the kind of person other people liked to be around. This is the detail that confuses every simplistic reading of Billy the Kid. He was not sullen, not violent by temperament, not the cold-eyed killer of the dime novels. He was just very fast. And the world he lived in kept presenting him with situations where fast was what was needed. He ended up in New Mexico during the Lincoln County War, a sustained, bloody commercial dispute between two rival business factions that hired private armies and shot each other for 18 months across the high desert until the landscape was comprehensively littered with bodies, and both factions were too exhausted and depleted to continue. The Kid picked the losing side. He always picked the losing side, not from poor judgment, but from loyalty, which was the quality the frontier consistently punished most efficiently. He escaped from custody twice. The second escape, from Lincoln County Courthouse in April 1881, was his most documented and incontestable moment of lethal violence. Shackled. Under guard. He somehow obtained a pistol from a guard named J.W. Bell, shot Bell on the staircase, crossed to the other side of the building, pulled a shotgun from the wall armory, shot Deputy Bob Ollinger from the second-floor window as Ollinger came running across the street below. Ollinger had taunted him. The Kid leaned out the window with the shotgun and said, "Hello, Bob," then fired. He spent the next 3 months in the New Mexico hills, a man with a governor's warrant on his head and nowhere to go that the warrant hadn't already reached. Pat Garrett found him on the night of July 14th, 1881, in a dark bedroom at Pete Maxwell's ranch in Fort Sumner. Garrett was sitting in the dark when the Kid walked in, barefoot, holding a knife, having come for a piece of meat from the kitchen. He sensed someone in the dark, said, "Quien who's there?" Garrett fired twice. The first shot killed him before the second one landed. He was buried the following morning in Fort Sumner. The tombstone reads, "Pals." One word. The three of them together, the Kid, Tom O'Folliard, Charlie Boder, all dead within months of each other, all buried in the same row. He died in the dark, asking who was there. He never found out. Number 1, John Wesley Hardin. Texas. Confirmed kills, 23 to 27. Claimed 42. The only name that has ever seriously held this position. He killed a man for snoring. Not metaphor, not exaggeration. On August 6, 1871, in room at the American House Hotel in Abilene, Kansas, John Wesley Hardin fired several shots through the wall of his room into the adjacent room because the man sleeping next door was snoring loudly enough to keep him awake. The bullet entered the sleeping man's chest. The sleeping man died. Hardin climbed out his window in his underwear, crossed the roof, dropped into the street, hid in a haystack until dawn, stole a horse, left Abilene. He was 18 years old. He already had 6 kills behind him. John Wesley Hardin is the most documented, most confirmed, most legally established killer in the history of the American frontier. Not the most claimed, the most documented. Court records, newspaper accounts, eyewitness testimony sworn under oath, a conviction for murder. A 25-year prison sentence served for 1 kill out of the 23 to 27 the evidence supports. He was born in 1853 in Bonham, Texas. His father was a Methodist preacher. He killed his first man at 15, a former slave named Mage, in a wrestling match that Hardin settled with a pistol because he was losing. He then killed 3 Union soldiers sent to arrest him for the first killing. He was not yet 16 years old, and he had already killed 4 men and established the pattern that would define the next 25 years of his life. He did not escalate to violence. He arrived there. The intermediate steps that other men went through, the argument, the threat, the warning, did not seem to exist in his operating procedure. A situation requiring violence produced violence. The calculation was that fast and that complete. He killed men in gunfights, in saloons, from hotel windows, on cattle drives, during range wars, in jail, and on general principle throughout Texas and Kansas. He killed Sheriff Charlie Webb in Comanche in 1874 in a face-to-face gunfight where Webb drew first and still lost. A hardened shot hitting Webb while Webb's bullet was still traveling toward him. Texas Rangers spent 3 years pursuing him after that. They finally caught him on a train in Florida in 1877 when Ranger John Armstrong came up behind him and clubbed him unconscious before he could draw. Even then, even caught from behind by surprise. The Rangers took no chances on the draw. He served 16 years. He studied law in Huntsville prison with the same focused intelligence he had applied to everything else. He passed the Texas bar exam in 1894. A man who had killed 23 people was certified to practice law in the state of Texas. He moved to El Paso. He drank. He gambled. He practiced law badly. He had become, in the specific entropy of his post-prison years, a smaller version of what he had been. Still dangerous, still capable, but fraying at the edges in the way that men fray when the thing that organized their entire identity is no longer available to them. John Selman found him at the Acme Saloon on August 19th, 1895. Selman was himself a veteran of frontier violence, a killer, a lawman, a man who had assessed the situation with the cold clarity of a professional. He walked in behind Hardin while the man was shaking dice at the bar, shot him through the back of the head, then fired 3 more times into the body on the floor. Because Selman was a thorough man, and because being thorough about John Wesley Hardin was the only rational approach. Hardin fell face forward, never saw it coming, never knew who fired it. The man who had killed 23 to 27 men in face-to-face confrontations across 4 decades died exactly the way Wild Bill Hickok died, shot from behind, in a saloon, by a man who correctly understood that a fair fight with John Wesley Hardin was not a fight you could win. His autobiography was published the year he died. He listed his kills by name where he knew them, by description where he didn't, with the methodical precision of a man who kept records and considered accuracy important. 42 names, 23 to 27 confirmed. Even the conservative number puts him alone at the top. By a distance, no one on this list comes close to closing. The fastest gun in the West died from behind, shot in the back of the head while shaking dice, because that was the only way anyone was ever going to kill John Wesley Hardin. And the man who finally did it knew it.